Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Auchincloss, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by asking about testing with you, Mr. Meehan. You noted in your testimony that you estimate that utilities will need to make capital investments totaling between $37 to $48 billion by 29 in order to fully comply with the drinking water standards. An enormous cost. It's something I hear a lot about from cities and towns. I represent 35 cities and towns. Massachusetts, because of a lot of legacy industry and relatively dense land use, we have a lot of accumulated PFAS. But the concern I hear is that the testing gives almost a sense of false precision. The distinguishing between 4 parts per trillion versus 6 parts per trillion, it can depend on the lab that's being tested. It can depend on the time of day. It can depend on what kind of gloves somebody is wearing when they're doing this. And a call for action that I have heard repeatedly is we need inline 24/7 high integrity testing of the PFAS content within drinking water facilities. Is that something that would be a useful investment from the federal government in terms of R&D?
Well, I would not rely on my law degree to give you technical advice on testing, but generally improve. This is a new frontier at these levels, not millions, not billions, but parts per trillion. And so I know that the early stages have been rough, beginning to get the standards right, the methods, the testing. So at least some, if you mean funding, would be useful to develop the most effective approaches, which I'm not confident to tell you what those are.
Ms. Bodine, if you have any comments, welcome those too.
Well, I wanted to point out that the drinking water standard that's been discussed here today, which is at 4 parts per trillion, is not the risk-based standard. It's based on what can actually have a reliable testing for, and it goes. The risk-based standards the EPA came out with were 0.01 parts per trillion and 0.03 for each of the 2 chemistries. And the 4 was at the, what is the practical quantification level?
Yeah, I don't think we're at reliable, at least in the sense of public health communications. Right. I don't think we're at reliable testing right now, because I think there's a lot of variability that actually undermines confidence in the test results. And we need to make federal investments in inline testing that is consistent and that people can understand in real time, not just lab by lab. I do want to move on this. I want one other issue. Ms. Donovan, I just so totally agree in what you have been saying, which is that debating 4 parts per trillion versus 6 parts per trillion in municipal water supplies, we are chasing this contamination at the point in the bioaccumulation cycle when it is the hardest to mitigate, and we got to go upstream. And we've got to address it at the point of production. You've talked about using the Resource Conservation Recovery Act and designating PFAS as a hazardous substance under that. Would you also support using TSCA, though, so that we can proactively regulate the production of PFAS?
I'm not a policy expert. I work at a church. So I'm really sorry I can't help you in the details of that, but if you don't mind and will allow me to take a little moment and address Mr. Peters, and maybe you both, if you feel the same way, be very careful about allowing shields where bad actors can hide behind them, because that's a slippery slope. And we have seen that play out in North Carolina, in the town of Pittsboro, and the town of Burlington, where these PFAS polluters are hiding, are co-opting the local utilities, running the show, and allowing the pollution to proceed. And then it becomes harder.
I hear that, and I think what we're trying to avoid is this downstream finger pointing at great expense and suffering. And it seems like while RCRA is good for remediating existing contaminated sites, and we should do that, we got to strengthen TSCA and expedite unreasonable risk determinations for PFAS as a chemical class, and enhancing their authority for persistent bioaccumulative substances, and just getting a lot tougher on non-essential uses of PFAS at the point of production. and phasing them out, as we did, for example, with ozone depleting chemicals in the 80s and 90s under the Montreal Protocol. Like, we have frameworks for how to do this.
When we did that with the Montreal Protocol, we replaced them with PFAS. And that's the problem. That gets into the green chemistry thing, is that we cannot keep doing regrettable substitutes, and we cannot allow industry to dictate it, because they have shown us over and over again that they don't self-regulate and they don't hold themselves accountable.
Yeah, we can't replace them with other toxic
time
substances, but we do need to replace them out of the point of production. I'll yield back.